Free speech is their right to say and have your opinions heard by whoever might want to hear it. Though it is important to remember that when writing to the public, one should try to keep unbiased, as other people may have different opinions than you. This should be more apparent in the editorial. Every day is January 6th now. An editorial that talks about how the right wing has been trying to slowly deteriorate our current form of government in a way that might benefit themselves. Though I agree with the main point of the argument, the method of which they get their point across seems very biased to me. And New York Times, being such a reputable organization, I believe they should try to stay more neutral when talking about such topics. I'll be discussing the aggressive language the editorial uses, how they have a lack of current Republicans who denounce the rioters and their actions, and the lack of Democrats who have been helping in the Republican agenda. The New York Times styles their argument with many words that describe and show the writer's anger. They use words such as terror, mayhem, wrest control in an effort to get their point across. These kinds of words show that the writer is angry and thus kind of manipulate the reader into agreeing with what they're saying. When talking about political issues, it is better to keep a neutral vocabulary, as impartiality shows that the writer has been keeping a broader view of the topic and sees different viewpoints and thus becomes more credible. Carrie Stapleton, a PhD whose research focuses on political psychology and communications, explained that when someone feels anger, they are less likely to be open to new information or ideas since they become loyal to what they already know. Though through anger, a reader can assume that the writer is biased and dismiss what the writer is saying. By demonstrating a neutral stance, the author can create more credibility for themselves. When the New York Times describes what Republicans could be doing instead of inciting violence, they use a lot of former leaders, such as Abraham Lincoln and John McCain, who have stood up for the Union and democracy first to their everlasting credit. Though they acknowledge the fact that some past Republicans have tried their best, not many current ones can be seen, or any can be seen in the editorial. Another New York Times article describes how the Republican Party censured two of its representatives, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, since they took part in the investigation into the assault that would result in putting innocent citizens behind bars. That article goes further and shows how many other Republican representatives did not approve of the censure of the previous Republicans. In putting information on current politicians of the opposite party that agree with their own points of view would show the reader that they respect the views of the other party and sees what's actually happening over there. In their editorial, the New York Times describes how Democrats should make use of what remaining power they have and end the filibuster for voting rights legislation, even if nothing else. Though this shows the Democrats are not using the power, it doesn't show that there are many Democrats who supported Trump who they describe as the instigator of the right. In a book called Trump's Democrats, they describe how Democrats can become supporters of Trump. The author of the book describes that many of Democrats have been trying to patronize local businesses since they think that the jobs should go to their own neighbors instead of foreigners, even if those foreigners are white. Thus explaining how Trump convinced them to vote for him in the election of 2016. During the entire editorial, New York Times wrote that the Republican Party is becoming more authoritarian, but did not show that Democrats have been aiding in their efforts. But they forgot to show the Trumpian Democrats, and thus portraying that they think that only Republicans can be aggressive, and not that showing an unbiased opinion. As shown, New York Times demonstrates that they are not as impartial as they could have been. and did not include facts that could have shown that they have thought of the topic from multiple different views. Though I do agree with some of the points New York Times made, this show of neutrality would have really aided in boosting their editorial's credibility.